It's a system that's basically fraud. We won't change the running system. Yeah, there's so much money and it has been established for such a long time. But if we now come together and create something new, it can be a beautiful planet, I'm quite sure.
Could you share, what was the tipping point for you over the last few years? What really turned you on, or had you got a sense that something like this was coming prior to COVID hitting? Tell us a little bit about how you got involved.
To me, it was quite obvious right from the beginning that something very, very odd was happening. I've been involved in science groups all over the world for, almost 2 decades. I was involved in vaccine research and talked at conferences or papers about it. And there was something not right when a new pathogen arrived. Within record times, all measures were prepared for us. And the one solution for all was a vaccine, excluding any medication, any lifestyle modifications or whatever. That was, unheard of.
Mm.
We had seen already censorship beforehand. Yeah, it's not just like that all happened in this time period. And we had papers retracted. We had presentations from conferences just withdrawn from the conference program, retrospect. And but the censorship is one thing, but the punishment, that was new. Yeah, that people lost their license. People actually, in Germany, people are still sent to prison.
I've seen,
doctors are still losing their livelihood because their bank accounts are frozen. It's not just Canadian activists. Yeah, it's doctors, and even their staff have no access to their bank accounts. This is a new stage.
And it's also then a major barrier then, because quite rightly, people are worried about their livelihoods. They've got families, they've got bills to pay. They may want to speak out, but when they're seeing people being arrested, losing their livelihoods, having their bank accounts frozen, it takes a real degree of courage. And I think we're quite fortunate that there are a number of people who are independent, who aren't tied to academia, for instance, or the traditional medical system, and they've been able to use their voice. But it's now the challenge, I think, is to get into that wider community, because I do get a sense that there is a wider movement, if you will, amongst the medical and scientific profession, if given the right opportunity without that fear, could actually help advance this conversation.
Yeah, very, very right. I mean, the one thing is that the degree of manipulation, even of scientists and the medical profession, which I had found absolutely staggering. Yeah, the religion of the pharmaceutical approaches to health had been indoctrinated into medical students for decades. So that's one thing that's quite surprising, given the facts that we all have nowadays about the importance of food, environmental toxins, and EMF exposure, which is all declared as conspiracy. Yes, of course. Very interesting. I just got a paper because I'm preparing a talk today, and I just got a paper today that the EMA just found out that the production of herbicides and pesticides for individual toxins, the producers had excluded a quarter of their publications to even hand over to the official. Had forgotten. Yeah, very interesting. It was just the ones that showed detrimental influence on pregnancy, on birth outcomes, on neurological development, immunological development. Strangely enough, they've forgotten this quarter. This introduction of fear for people forgot. My wife, even a few years ago, she said, "Why are you only involved in subjects that you go to conferences, have to pay everything yourself? You don't get a single euro, and you're off all the time." That's the one thing. And then, why are you only involved in conspiracy theories? But it was not, and it's not. We have 40,000 studies on the influence of EMF, and it's quite logical what it does with our health. And most approaches in medicine are not based on getting you healthy. They're just a disease management system. Once you recognize that, I was talking to Paul Merrick how he cured himself of diabetes type 2 with lifestyle changes in diet. Yeah, and nobody had told him. Nobody in his entire profession. And when I give lectures at hospitals and for medical professionals, it's exactly the same. Nobody told us we can cure our high blood pressure. Nobody could cure us. It told us that we can cure, our risk factors for our stroke and heart attacks, and then they do it. And within 2 weeks, sometimes all blood levels are normal and they don't require anything. And this science is out there.
Yes.
Coming back to the fear that you said that was created, the second thing my wife always said, why are you only talking to retired scientists, most of them women, because they're independent.
Yes, exactly.
All the others, they could lose their livelihood.
That's right.
Yeah, with their practices or being a part of the university, which would turn against you. It's a system that's basically fraud. It is basically corrupt and therefore any reform doesn't make much sense. That's why we're here for. We want to create a better way, and we have all these wonderful people now uniting. And I think if we just leave the other one behind, because we won't change the running system. Yeah, there's so much money, and it has been established for such a long time. But if we now come together and create something new, it can be a beautiful planet, I'm quite sure.
Absolutely. Well, I think a lot of the things that we're seeing, everything from the censorship to the corruption, it's actually its defense mechanism. The incumbent system is defending itself. It's almost like they see us like a virus, and it's like the immune system, or an external pathogen, and the immune system's kicking in to try and preserve the status quo. And that's typical of any major institutional or governing system. So I think that on that basis, you're absolutely right. I think that's the key, is it's actually become the catalyst to think about where do we go next. What I find most fascinating is I think the evidence is now reaching a new level of sophistication. We're seeing the publishing of new papers, peer review, whereas it was certainly not done on a hunch at the beginning, but we were dealing with an emerging situation that's now becoming formalized. So tell us a little bit about what you're most excited about for the future.
Well, I'm a great fan of Walter Russell. Yeah, one of the last universal genius. He was called, and he said that any event in the universe, once a force is created, it will create an equal counterforce. This is an image that keeps me alive.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
So this is where we are at the moment, and rightly so. That we do see the publications with the plasmid paper, which should frighten the hell out of all of us, that it's not only incorporated into our genome, but it can actually be spread whilst we're communicating with each other. Or the Cleveland study just came out that proving that each shot actually increases your likelihood of getting COVID and even being hospitalized.
I saw that, yes.
Yeah, in a dose-dependent matter. I mean, how much more crazy?
That's crazy. But the ridiculous thing about that paper is it's still, and this is the thing, and it's like the media. People make their decision based on the headline. They don't read the next paragraph or the article or then the further research. And that paper, if you get to the conclusions, it still uses the same conclusion that's safe and effective, even though within the results it shows quite clearly that your chances of getting COVID increase by the number, but that doesn't become, they can't go over the line still.
Oh yeah.
Even if the evidence itself, but most people will still just read the pretext and the conclusion, and all that body of work that tells a totally different story is missed. And that for me is most concerning. Particularly, I'm not a scientist, but I've, for the last 3 years, read thousands of scientific papers, had lots of scientific connections, and I feel like I'm getting a degree in science and education. But again, even with that, now I see a fertile ground for new journals, medical journals that offer gold standard, new institutions that are independent for research. I think the hard thing is people are looking for short-term fixes, and none of these things are really easy. They're simple, but not easy. And it takes time, it takes funding. But I think that's, I always forget the Buckminster Fuller quote about, there's no point fighting the old, you have to build the new. And this is where where there's a challenge, there's an equal or greater opportunity. And I see these opportunities now emerging in front of us.
And that's a beautiful thought, It's so hard to, within all that has been created and will follow us through the next few years, unfortunately, and will shape humanity as we are, knowing that we did now actually modify our DNA. But keeping in mind, that we already tried this. We did this with plants. Yeah, we do this with animals. Yeah, in New Zealand, cows are bred in order to produce the potentially harmful casein variant for us. Never mind that they have enormous health consequences and die of cruel new diseases that haven't existed beforehand. The hybris of humans, and I think that's maybe why we also consider it sometimes a spiritual war. Yeah, is really. If you listen to Harari,
yes,
the time of God has ended, and it's time for humans to take its place. What a statement! I mean, it has become so surreal, and to become a little bit more modest as humans, to see that we are part of nature and we have to integrate instead of separate. That's why this is all what it's all about here. It's not about solutions from the ones who created the problems in the first place, quoting from
yes.
Why do we give it in the hands that created the problem?
That's right.
That's ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, we get the serial killer out and say, well, what do you think? How can we improve?
Right. Yes. Well, there's also, I think it was Einstein who said that you can't solve a problem with the same thinking that got you into it. And there's almost an expectation amongst some that the governments or other institutions are going to fix the problems, yet they are creating them. So the new thinking has to come from outside of the current. The messages are the same, however way we look, and the messages from history show us this to be true. And I think what I see is I zoom out, and you're right about that counter-reaction, because I think for a long time during COVID, there was a small minority of people, as I showed on stage last year, how it created a ripple effect. Yes. But how that ripple effect grows, and that is part of the counterbalance. And I think there was a concern that, why don't so many people see this? But now more and more people are seeing it. And that is part of that natural cycle. And again, history will show us that that's going to happen. Now, we can't rest on our laurels and say, well, it's going to resolve itself anyway. This is the opportunity, I think, for all of us to find our path and to find how we want to participate in the change we want to see, which leads me to my final question is, beyond this event for you personally, what are you going to be working on after this? What are you driving forward?
Well, I was talking with Mark Trozzi about this. We have this deep longing to detach ourselves from hours and hours of computer work every day. Go back in the garden, grow our own food, get back our instruments, make music together, laugh together, and have a time that is filled with real human value.
Indeed.
And thank you so much for being where you are and who you are, because it's one thing to have all the conclusions. Yeah, you have the historians, you have the psychologists, you have the scientists, you have the doctors that recognize the problems, but if you can't communicate them, that's useless. So thank you so much for your work, for bringing out this message. And a lot more people than last year are open to messages now. They're not bound so much to fear. And that's, as we can see now, all these attempts by FDA, by EMA, by the media, by the EU to go further with the censorship, and that you can actually accuse your family member or your neighbor now on the WHO, the EU, and the FDA website. That's what they are. They are scared. They know they're at the tipping point, and they can only reach it if they silence people like you.
That's right.
And let's do anything that won't happen.
It's hard work to go through that censorship. I've never seen anything like it. But we'll find a way. But it's that in-person connection where we can build that, restore that connection, because there are still a lot of people who are afraid, and there's fear at every corner, whether it was fear of the COVID situation or fear of what could come, and a reality that hasn't even emerged yet, that we project in our mind as a worst case scenario. And I think we have to catch ourselves and bring us back to that possibility of what tomorrow could look like if we remind ourselves that our destiny is in our hands.
And that brings me to one thing that, maybe just to make a finishing remark here, how they've been able to put us where we are at the moment, and it's just by the element of fear. Yeah. And I often use the analogy that the fear actually takes away our connection to our frontal lobes, our thinking process, makes us jump back into deep brainstem structures, which basically are just reactive,
Yes.
reflective.
Yes.
And what we know now from research about the quantity of information that we're taking in with our mobile phones and etc., this has the same effect. It disconnects ourselves from
Yes.
the lobes. It's even independent of the information that we get. And, both of us, I think, are quite, information.
Yes, that's right.
We have to be clear.
We have to. Yeah. Well, I just took a holiday for the first time in, months, if not years. And I took a digital detox and a physical detox. I took the opportunity to do that.
Excellent.
But it was almost like coming out of a vortex. And it was like the sky happened to actually be blue. The sun came out, but almost mentally and emotionally, this blue sky was there again, beyond the clouds. And it's funny, my son, we were supposed to travel. It would have been his first flight. It took me into my 21st birthday to go on my first flight. My son was going to go in his 21st month. But I remember flying for the first time and going through the clouds and just being completely in awe, and then seeing that vast blue sky everywhere. And I think it's important that we remind ourselves that blue sky metaphorically is also available. And we have to, as much as we spend our time in the clouds trying to navigate what's going on, we also have to look beyond it and see that blue sky as well, because it's always there for us.
That's a beautiful analogy. And to restore that awe. I remember very well, when you said that, my first flight, coming above the clouds, and I was addicted to that view.
Yes.
Coming back to the awe of the miracles of life, because there's beauty everywhere. It's, there are universal laws connecting us, and it's not status or belief or whatever. It's just communication via heart, and it's being part of this entire creation. That's it.
Magical. Well, it's been lovely spending time with you. Thank you for being here with us this morning.
Thank you.